One of the things that our generation is blessed with is this unprecedented phenomena that Baruch Hashem, there are hundreds and thousands of people who are coming back to their roots. More and more people every single day are trying to find out more and more about their origin of Yiddishkeit, what Torah is all about, what the grandfathers did, etc. Lehavdil, even by the Goyim, by the non-Jews, there's also this concept of going back to the roots, to the source, which is the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, the 7 mitzvahs of Noach that the Rebbe gave already in the beginning of times, and slowly but surely, when it came to Matan Torah, when the Rebbe gave the Torah to the Yidden, he told Moshe Rabbeinu that he should see to it that all the Goyim also should do all the Sheva mitzvahs, etc. So this is something that we don't find before in history. Together with this beautiful phenomena, there is a challenge, and that is questions. Many people have questions, and we have to be in the forefront to be able to answer all those questions. And sometimes there are questions that we think maybe we should discard them because they're not valid even to give an answer. Sometimes no, you never know. If you do answer even such a question, you may bring back one person and through that a whole family to their roots. So the question is, how do we decide what is a good question, what is not a good question, and how to deal with these questions? So, for this issue, the Torah discusses it in a very, very beautiful way in Parshas Behar, when the Torah discusses the concept of a question. So let's go directly into the source and let's see what the Torah has to tell us over here. A fascinating concept. In Parsha Behar, in Perik Chof Hei Pasuk Aleph, the Torah says as follows: Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe Behar Sinai Leimer. The Rebbe told Moshe Rabbeinu in Har Sinai, and he said as follows: Daber el Bnei Yisrael v'amartu aleihim. Speak to the Jewish people and tell them as follows: Ki savayu el haaretz asher ani noisen lachem. When you will come to the land that I am going to give you. The Rebbe is now talking to the Jews in the desert. When you're going to get into Eretz Yisrael, into the Holy Land, v'shavsa haaretz shabbos lashem. The land should rest. Take a year of a sabbatical. Even not in Jewish life, there's something called a sabbatical, that you take a year off from work. Where does that come from? From the Torah. The Torah has a halach which is called the concept of Shmita, and this is what the Rabbi says: the 7th year you take a rest, and the Torah spells it out in Pasuk Gimel. Sheish shanim tizra sodecha. 6 years you should sow your field. 6 shanim tizmer karmecha. 6 years you're going to prune your vineyard. Ve'osavta estvuosa, and you're going to harvest the crop. However, says the Torah in Pasuk Dalet, we're still in source number 1 in the 4th line. Uvashono hashviis, however, the 7th year, Shabbos Shabbosin yihyeh la'aretz. It should be a total sabbatical. It should be a total rest for the land. Shabbos Lashem. Sod cholei sizra, your field you should not seed. V'char mecholei sizmer, and your vineyard you shouldn't prune. Not only that, even Pasuk Hey, a sefiach ketzircha loy siktzir, even the little crop that grows by itself when you don't plow and seed one year, so there's still going to be those little ones that are going to come out. Those are called sfichim. It's called like the aftergrowth. So even those you're not allowed to cut in Shemitah. Vesin venezirecha loy siftzir, even those little grapes that come out on their own, also you're not allowed to cut. Shnas shabbosin yihyeh la'aretz. It should be a total year of sabbatical for the land. Pasuk Vav, V'hoisa Shabbos ha'aretz lachem le'ochla. That year should be total left over to eat. For who? Lecha, for you, le'avdecha, and for your slave, ve'la'moscha, and for your maid, ve'la'masecha, ve'lischircho se'shavcha garim imach, and all those who live together with you, and ve'livhemtecha ve'lachaya asher be'artzecha, and even for all the animals that are in your land, tiyechol tvu'asa le'echad. It should be for everyone to eat. We're not going to go now into the details of Shemitah, but the basic concept is 6 years we plow and seed the land. And the 7th year, Shabbos Shabbosin, Shnas Shabbosin, is a total year of we don't touch the land. That's the laws of Shmita. Pasuk Ches, the Torah tells us another interesting law, and this is the law of Yovel. Before we go into it, let me just briefly say what is going to happen here. After we have 7 Shmitas, which means 7 times 7 is 49. So after the 7th Shmita, the 50th year is going to be Yovel. Everyone knows what is a Jubilee. The Jubilee is 50 years. When the 50th year comes, we do again another extra sabbatical. In other words, not only do we not work the 7th year, but also the 50th. Let's look at the pasuk. Pasuk Ches. V'safarta lecha. You should count sheva shabseis shonim, sheva pe'amim. You should count 7 shmitas 7 times. V'hoyu lecha. And then the total count will be yemei sheva shabseis shonim. What's going to be after 7 shmitas? Teisha v'arbaim shana. 49 years. What are you going to do after this 49th year? Pasuk Tes, Ve'havarto shofar trua b'chodesh hashvi be'oser lachodesh. On the 10th day of the first month, of the 7th month, which is the 10th day, which is Yom Kippur, B'yom HaKippurim, Taviru shofar b'chol artzachem. On Yom Kippur, you're going to blow a special blow, and that one is going to mark the Jubilee year for the Yidden. In the Torah, what we blow today on Yom Kippur is not something that the Torah says. The Torah says that we blow Rosh Hashanah. Yom Kippur is another one, and we compare it to Yovel, etc. But the Torah definitely says that on the 50th year, on Yom Kippur, then we blow a horn, the shofar, in order to remember the concept of the Jubilee, the Yovel. Pasuk Yud, and you should sanctify the 50th year, and you're going to call this year a emancipation for the slaves. In other words, all the slaves, whoever sold himself before, is going to go free. Yovel hiti elochem. This is going to be a Yovel, a Jubilee. Veshavtem ishel achuzasei veishel mishpachtei toshuvu. Everyone is going to go back home. Even someone who sold himself as a slave, he cannot sell himself past Yovel. By Yovel, he has to come back home. And the Torah continues again. Pasuk Yud Aleph. Yovel hi shnas hachamishim shana tiyelachem. The Yovel is going to come out on the 50th year. Lo yisizru v'lo yisiktzur es ficheha. You should not you should not seed anything, you should not cut anything. Why? Because Yovel is a year of holiness. From whatever comes out on its own, you can eat, but you're not allowed to touch the field. And Pasuk Yud Gimel, the Torah finishes off the laws of Yovel. When Yovel comes around, everyone comes back home. So we have 2 laws already. We have one law, the laws of Shmita, which is every 7th year. 6 years you work, the 7th you rest. The second law that Torah tells us in this parsha, that after 49 years, after the 7th Shmita, the 50th year, again, we don't work. So we have 2 years in a row that we don't work the field. Now comes the Torah in Pasuk Yud Dalet and gives us a 3rd law. What's the 3rd law? When you are going to sell something to your friend, or you're going to buy something, don't cheat. The Torah goes now through the laws of cheating. How is it possible that someone should cheat? Because let's say, since we know that in Yovel, this is just an example, being that in Yovel all the land goes back to the original owner, so let's say there's another 4 years to Yovel, and I'm going to sell a field. I know that in 4 years from now, that field is going to come back to me, because you're only allowed to sell up to Yovel. And I sold it for 10 years. So obviously, I cheated the guy, because he didn't realize that after 4 years, he's not going to be able to have this field. So therefore, the Torah goes over here, the halacha is the laws of cheating. Then the Torah says, Pasuk Yud Ches, Vasis, I'm still holding in source number 1. Vasisem es chukoisai, ves mishpatei tishmeru, vasisem oisam. And when you are going to follow all the mitzvahs properly, vishavtem ala oretz levetach. You'll live in the land with sureness that everything will be just fine. In other words, God will give you all the blessings. And not only that, Pasuk Yutes, there's going to be more blessing. Ve'nosna ha'aretz period, the land will give its fruit. V'achaltem l'seiva, and you're going to eat, you're going to be satisfied. V'shavtem levetach oleo, and you're going to be safe in the land. It's going to be a beautiful time. Now comes the Torah and says something very, very interesting. Pasuk Chaf. What does the Torah say? Vechi soimru, and when you're going to ask, wait a minute, the Rebbe gave us a law, which is the law of Shmita, which means that on the 7th year we cannot plow and seed our fields. So comes an unbelievable question, Vechi soimru, ma noichal b'shana hashvis, what are we supposed to eat in the 7th year? Hey, loy nizra, we don't seed, veloy nesef es tvuaseinu, and we are not going to gather any crop, any of the wheat that grows. So the question is, the Rebbe gives us a mitzvah called Shmita. In that year, we don't plow and seed. So what are we supposed to eat at the end of the year? Says the Rebbe, don't worry. Pasuk Chafalev, Vetzivisi as birchosi lachem bashon ashishis. I'm going to give a special blessing in the 6th year, the crop of the 6th year. Ve'osa says tatvuo l'shloish hashanim. It's going to make, the crop is going to be for 3 years. Which means the 6th year will be enough for the 7th and the 8th. And then, Pasuk of Beis, Uzratem es hashon hashminis. In the 8th year, you're going to seed and plow. V'achaltem min hatvua yoshan, and you're going to eat from the old crop of the 6th year. Ad hashono hatshis ad boitvuaso tochli yoshan. Until the 9th year, until the new crop of the 8th year is going to finally come out, you're going to eat from the earlier one. So what comes out over here? That the Rebbe gave to the Yidden the laws of Shmita. And the Yidden are going to come and say, hey, wait a minute. And what are we supposed to eat in that year of Shmita? And says the Rebbe, don't worry, you have enough. In the 6th year, there's going to be enough for the next year, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, etc. Comes here an unbelievable question, which all the Mefarshim tried to answer. We're just going to bring 2, 3 of them. Wait a minute. The Torah says the halachas of Shmita. Then the Torah said the halachas of Yovel. Then the Torah says the halachas of cheating. Then the Torah says all the brachas that you're going to get. Then says the Torah, and what if you're going to ask, what are we supposed to eat after the year of Shmita? This question doesn't belong here. The question should have been right in the beginning. The beginning of the parsha, the first halachas are the halachas of Shmita. So as soon as the Rebbe said the halachas of Shmita, before he even went and told us about Yovel and cheating, etc., as soon as Shmita, the Rebbe should have said that the Yidden are going to ask, and if you're going to say, what are we supposed to eat? So why did the Rebbe wait with this question until after the laws of Yovel, after the laws of cheating, after all the brachas? It just doesn't fit here. Not only that, the Torah says, Vechi soimru, and when you are going to ask. The Torah doesn't say, and if you are going to ask. The Torah says, and when you are going to ask. That means that the Rebbe takes it for granted that Yidden are going to ask this question. Why? Why does the Rebbe suspect Yidden that they're going to ask such a question? But the Rebbe told Yidden, don't work on Shabbos. Don't work on Shabbos. And trust me, there are plenty of Yidden that most of the business is Shabbos. Most of the stores that sell jewelry or nice clothing and things like that, when do people go shop? On Shabbos, in the weekend. The Rebbe says, no, on Shabbos you close your store. Does the Rebbe say in the Torah, oh, and if you're going to ask, what am I going to do with the loss? No. Because the Rebbe says no is no. All of a sudden comes a Shmita and we ask a question. What are we supposed to do with the food? What do you mean what? The Rebbe said no is no. So let's go back to the first question. The first question is, why didn't the Rebbe put the question v'chisoimru manoichal right after Shmita? So let's see what the Ramban answers on this. Go to your source number 2. Says the Ramban as follows: v'chisoimru manoichal b'shana shvis. And if you're going to ask, and when you're going to ask, what are we supposed to eat in the 7th year? Says the Ramban kemoi mesures, that this pasuk is not really in the correct order. Why? Because the pasuk says v'chisoimru b'shana. The pasuk says v'chisoimru b'shana. If you're going to say on the 6th year, what are we supposed to eat in the 7th year? V'chisoimru manoichal b'shana shvis. What are we supposed to eat in the 7th year? Says the Ramban, what they're going to ask. What are we supposed to eat in the 7th year? Manoichal ki hadai golohem ba'avur hashminis. When are they going to ask this question? At the end of the 8th year. Before we go into the Ramban, let me just say briefly what he's saying, and then you'll see it in the words. The Ramban is basically saying that just plain Shmita is not really going to bring out this question. Because Shmita finished the 6th year, a person plows and seeds, and the crop of the 6th year we eat in the 7th, and in the 8th we could already seed and plow again, so it's not such a big question. The question comes only after Yovel. When I have 2 years that I cannot plow and seed, here is where I'm going to have the problem. Therefore, according to the Ramban, the question of v'chisoimru manoichal is not regarding the year of Shmita. It's only after you have Shmita and Yovel both together. That's why the Torah puts the question of v'chisoimru manoichal where? After Shmita and Yovel. Now look inside in the Ramban and you'll see. Go again in the source number 2 in the 3rd line. Ki v'shetchila shana hashmita v'hayovel mit Tishrei. When the Shmita starts, when? Tishrei. Mipeires hashishis yechol b'shvis. So from the 6th year they're going to eat in the 7th. Ve'alkein when the Rebbe just said that he's going to give for 3 years, which 3 years? This is after Yovel goes away. This is when we need the crop for 3 years. Why? Because the Rebbe just said, don't worry, you're going to have from the old crop, etc. So we see here, according to the Ramban, the question that Yidden are going to ask is only once in 50 years after they have Shmita and Yovel consecutive back to each other. But just because of Shmita, the people wouldn't necessarily ask the question. That's what the Ramban answers. The Abarbanel also goes along these lines, and we're soon going to see that Rashi will not agree with the Ramban and with the Abarbanel. In source number 3, the Abarbanel also goes along the same lines, that with the Torah, he actually tries to disconnect the pasuk. The first half of the pasuk discusses the Shmita. The second half of the pasuk discusses Yovel. I'm not going to read it now through it. If you want, you could look through yourself the whole source over here. But basically, the Barbanel also goes along the same lines as the Ramban, that the whole question of v'chisoimru manoichal, what are we supposed to eat, is only after Shmita and Yovel. That is why the Rebbe puts it over here after the story of Yovel. But now, if you're going to go to source number 4, you're going to see that the Rashi does not agree with that. If you look in source number 4, Rashi on Pasuk Chaf Aleph, where it says, Uzratem, and you're going to plant and seed when in the 6th year for the other years, says Rashi, Umikra ze nemar bishar hashmitois kulan. Rashi says that the question of v'chisoimru manoichal that the Yidden are going to ask, what are we supposed to eat, is regarding Shmita, not regarding Yovel. Regarding Yovel, of course, you're going to have that question. But really, the question comes up every 7 years. The Rebbe just says, don't plow and seed a field a full year. So you didn't ask a question. What do you mean? We're not supposed to plow. What are we supposed to eat? And this question, the Rebbe should have put it right after Shmita. Why did the Rebbe wait till after Yovel and after the laws of cheating and after all the brachas that the Rebbe is giving? Even according to the Ramban and the Barbanel, that it goes for after the year of Yovel. So the Rebbe should have put it right after Yovel. Not wait till after the brachas and till after the halachas of cheating. Should have done it right there. So obviously the question belongs here and not there. And the shaila is, why take? Why take did the Rebbe wait until there to say that? We're going to ask one more question, and that is, as we mentioned it before briefly, that the Rebbe says that what's going to happen, v'chi seimru, and when you're going to ask, what are we supposed to eat? Why is the Rebbe suspecting Yidden that they are going to question the Rebbe? Why? Yidden listen to the Rebbe, just like we said before. The Rebbe says, keep Shabbos. We keep Shabbos. We don't ask any questions. Where am I supposed to get my business? Obviously, if the Rebbe says you don't work on Shabbos, the Rebbe will give us the brachas. Then everything will be fine. So how come when it comes to Shmita, the Rebbe says that the Yidden are going to ask a question? So someone is saying that v'chi and v'chi seimru doesn't mean and when you will ask, it means if you will ask. Because ki could mean different things. Well, let's look at Rashi. Rashi holds that when you say v'chi seimru, that means when you will ask. Where do we see that? Go to source number 5. This is later in Parsha Shoftim, where the Rebbe says the halachas of the prophets, of the Nevi'im. Says the Rebbe as follows. Look, source number 5 in Shoftim, Perek Yud Ches, Pasuk Yud Dalet. Says the Rebbe, Ki hagoyim ha'ela shar'ato yeresh eisam. These nations that you are going to inherit, that you are going to take their land, which is in Eretz Yisrael, el me'oinim vel koismim yishmo. They follow the sorcerers, the magicians. Ve'ato, but you, the Jewish people, loichein. We don't do that like that way. This is not how the Rebbe gave it to you. The Rebbe is going to give you a prophet from the Jewish, amongst the Jewish people. You should listen to him. And the Rebbe over there gives a whole bunch of details, what you're supposed to do with the prophet, etc. Then says the Rebbe, Hanovi. However, the prophet, Asher Yoz L'daber Dover Bishmi, that he is going to say something in my name. Eis Asher Lo Yitzivisiv L'daber, that I did not tell him to say so. And the Rebbe explains over there how you find that out. Says the Rebbe, Umeis Hanovi Hahu, that prophet has to get killed. And if you're going to say in your heart, you're going to ask yourself, how are we supposed to know when a prophet comes and says, the Rebbe told me? How are we supposed to know if the Rebbe told him or the Rebbe did not tell him? And the Torah discusses over there how you do that. What is the expression in the Torah? Number 6, V'chi soymar bilvavcha. And either when or if, right? V'chi, just like we have over here by us, v'chi. Let's look at Rashi, source number 6. V'chi seimra b'vavacha. Says Rashi, asidim atem leimar. You are going to ask this question. When are you going to ask this question? Says Rashi, Kishayava Chananya ben Azar u'misnabe. When Chananya ben Azar is going to come and he's going to give his certain prophecies, and v'yirmiyah tzavach, and Yirmiyah is going to scream against it, etc. I'm not going to go now into the details of that whole story. So what do we see? That Rashi holds that when it says v'chi soymar, when you are going to do that, means when you're going to do that, not if. So comes back the question, why is it that the Eibishter is suspecting Yidden, that they're going to question the Eibishter? What are we supposed to do in the 7th year? Why? Why is the Eibishter suspecting Yidden? There must be something missing here. Not only that, we said that the Rebbe says the halachas of Shmita. The Rebbe said the halachas of Yovel. The Rebbe said the halachas of cheating. And then the Rebbe gives special brachas. What are the brachas? That we're going to have food, we're going to have a security in the land, everything. And let's look how Rashi tells us even more what these blessings are. Go to source number 7. Parsha Behar, Perek Chav Hei, Pasuk Yotes. The Torah says, V'nosna ha'aretz pirya, v'achaltem l'seiva, v'shavtem l'vetach. The land will give its fruit, and you're going to eat, and all satisfied, and you're going to be safe. Says Rashi, what does it mean? V'nosna ha'aretz pirya, v'shavtem l'vetach. What does it mean you're going to be very safe? That even in a year when there's no rain, you're also not going to have to worry. The Rebbe will take care of you. You just do the mitzvahs, the Rebbe will take care of everything else. Not only that, you're going to eat and you're going to be satisfied. Says Rashi, what does it mean satisfied? Even in your intestines, there's going to be a blessing. What does that mean, there's going to be a blessing? Sometimes a person has a lot of food, but he's ill. He's nauseous. He doesn't feel good. He doesn't digest well. Digesting is also a bracha. I heard, unfortunately, during the war and during the hunger, the people who were healthy, so even if they ate a little bit, it was enough. But there were people who were not healthy, even if they ate a lot, it still didn't help. This alone, that a person is going to be healthy, this in itself is also a bracha. Says the Rebbe, that I'm not only benching you, that your land is going to be healthy, and you're going to have all the food that you need, and you're going to be safe, you're also going to be healthy. So the question is, you didn't just heard from the Rebbe such beautiful brachas, so why all of a sudden, after hearing all of this, they're going to ask, so what are we supposed to eat in the 7th year? Even in a year that there's no rain, they're not going to have to worry. So why are they worried about Shmita? Obviously must be that we got the whole story wrong. So we have to understand, as we say in Yiddish, what is going on over here? And obviously the main question is Rashi. Rashi, who always helps us with everything that we need to understand in the Chumash. This is such an open question, and Rashi doesn't even address it. So it must be, as the Rebbe always told us, that if Rashi doesn't address the question, which is so simple right in the pasuk, it must be that Rashi already addressed this question in the past, somewhere in the Chumash. And by remembering what Rashi told us in the past, we are going to be able to understand over here what is going on. So, where did Rashi tell us this in the past? So, let's analyze what we said right in the beginning, that we're going to analyze the concept of questions. Here, the Yidden are asking a sort of valid question. The problem is, as a pastish for a Yid to ask such a question. A Yid shouldn't be asking the Eibishter such a question, questioning the Eibishter's halachas. So obviously, let's analyze here the question. Is it correct to ask questions to the Eibishter? Some people say, what do you say? Is it correct to ask questions? Is it correct? Well, the Rebbe wants you to ask questions. On the other hand, the Rebbe does not want you to ask questions. He wants you to accept everything with Kabbalah soil. So, should we ask questions or not? Let's look at tradition. There's a Yom Tov that even people who don't necessarily keep yet, unfortunately, Torah and mitzvahs, but many, many, many people will do a Pesach Seder. They'll get together, the family. Why do we make a Seder? Pesach is one of the highlights of the year. We make a Seder. What's the first part of the Seder? Kaddish. What is Kaddish? Ask any kid. What do you learn in Cheder? What is Kaddish? When the Tate kommt daheim from Shul, macht bald Kiddush. That when the father comes home from Shul, he right away makes Kiddush. Why? As die Kinder soll nicht einschlafen werden, that the kids shouldn't fall asleep. Und sie sollen fragen die Manishtana, and they should ask, they shouldn't fall asleep, and they should ask the Manishtana, which means the whole Seder of Pesach, the ganze Seder, is for what? That the children should ask a question. We don't say, and the kids should stay up till the end of the Seder to hear the answer. No. We're only concerned with the question. The main thing is the kids should ask a question. Once they ask a question, then we're all happy. Why? Because the Rebbe is ingraining in us that Yidden must ask questions. Learn. The only way you learn is if you ask a question. If you don't ask questions, then as the Mishnah says, Lo yabai shalamed. If you're ashamed to ask questions, then you're not going to learn anything. But is every question a valid question? Let's see. Let's analyze this. Let's look, obviously in the Torah, in the source. In source number 8, where does the Rebbe say that people have to ask questions? By the Seder. When your child is going to ask you. So let's go to that pasuk and let's look at it. Look at source number 8 in Parsha Boy, pasuk Perikut Gimel, pasuk Yud Aleph. The Torah says as follows. This is right after the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim. The Rebbe says, when the Rebbe will bring you to Eretz Yisrael, like he promised you and your parents, and he'll give it to you. All the firstborn you should give to the Eibishter. This is not only of animals, but also continues in Pasuk Yud Gimel, B'choil b'cher banecha tifta. And all your firstborn you should redeem. As you all know, there's a mitzvah called the mitzvah of Pidyon haben, which means that when a child is 30 days old, if he is a firstborn, you have to give him to the kohen, and you could obviously buy him by giving the kohen. You could redeem him by giving the kohen the famous 5 slime, etc., etc. The mitzvah of Pidyon haben. Continues the Eibishter, Pasuk Yudaled, Vehoyo kisholcha bincha machar mazos. And if tomorrow your child is going to ask you, what is this? You should tell him that Bechayzik Yod Etzion Hashem Mitzrayim Beis Avodim. The Eibishter took us out of Egypt. And when Pare was making it giving it a hard time to send us out from Egypt, the Eibishter killed all the firstborn of the Egyptians. Therefore the Eibishter told us that we should do the Pidyon haben, and we have to redeem all our firstborn. So here the Torah says, and when your child is going to ask you tomorrow, what is this? So from here we see the concept of asking a question. Says Rashi, look at Pasuk 9, in source 9, Rashi, when your son is going to ask you, what is this? Says Rashi, what type of a question is this? Ze tinoik tipesh. This is a child which is a tipesh, which is, he's not unintelligent. He doesn't know how to ask a question properly. He just says, what is this? He doesn't go any further. He doesn't analyze the question. He doesn't analyze the situation. However, in a different place in the Torah, we have the question worded a little bit differently. Here the question is, Mazos, what is this? There's another place in the Torah where it says, when your son is going to ask you, what does he ask? What are the laws and the different statuses of certain mitzvahs? Says Rashi, Shailas ben Chacham. This is very a shaila of a Chacham, of a child who is intellectual. Now comes Rashi and tells us the famous 4 sons that we know in the Haggada. Says Rashi, Dibra Torah keneged arba banim. The Torah, when the Torah says your child is going to ask you a question, says the Rebbe, there are 4 types of questions. There's a son who is a tam, the simple guy, the unintelligent. Then you have a Rasha. Then you have a she'eino yedei alisha, one who does not ask a question. And then the one that asks in an intellectual way. The famous 4 sons of the Haggada. Now here in this Sikha, which by the way I didn't mention before, that this is all based on Likutei Sichos, volume 27, in pages 183 through 190. In this Sikha, the Rebbe discusses a very beautiful, long arichas on the concept of the Arba Bonim, the 4 sons in the Haggada, the order, how they're written, why does each one ask in a specific way, but we're not going to get into that right now, because now we're just going to be focusing on one detail, and that is the question. So Rashi is making it very, very clear. When we look at a question in the Torah, we could analyze by looking at the question if this is a question that is being asked by a chacham, by someone who's intellectual and is trying to understand something, or this is a question which has been asked by a rasha, someone who is antagonizing. He's saying, what is this? Why is the Rebbe saying this? Why and why and why? That's already a ben rasha. Then you have the other 2 who neither does not ask a question or the tam. So when we look at a question in the Torah, it's either an intellectual one, which is a positive question, or it's a little bit on the negative, which we have to be very careful on how to handle it. So, let's go back now to our case. The Torah gives a halacha, and now I'm going to test you here, eh? The Torah gives a halacha over here. Shmita. That what? That there comes the 7th year, no work. Says the Torah, you're going to ask, hey, what am I supposed to eat? Is this a question of a ben chacham, or is this a question of ben rasha? What do you say? Obviously, a ben rasha, right? A negative. The Rebbe just says, don't plow, and the guy comes and says, hey, what am I supposed to eat? What kind of business is this? right? So seemingly it looks like that this is a very negative question to the Eibishter. It's a valid question, but it's a little bit negative. It's not from a Ben Chacham. A Ben Chacham wouldn't question the Eibishter. It's only a Rasha who would have questioned the Eibishter. Comes Rashi and says, no, you got the whole story wrong. This is not a question of a Ben Chacham. This is a question of a Rasha. This is a question of a Chacham. Unbelievable what this guy is saying. Give a look. If this was a Rasha, if this was a wicked person who's trying to question the Eibishter, why did the Eibishter, not like all the people who say, where was the Eibishter during the Holocaust? Or where were you, why, what? There's sometimes the person is asking because he wants to understand, and sometimes he just uses it as an excuse why not to do Torah mitzvahs. So here, is it an excuse or is it a question? We're going to see now that this is a beautiful question from a Ben Chacham. Why is it a beautiful question? The Eibishter told him the halachas of Shmita. Did he ask any questions? No. The Eibishter told him the halachas of Yovel. Did he ask any questions? No. He accepted it without any problem. The Eibishter gave the halachas of cheating. Did he ask any questions? No. He accepted it without any problem. The Eibishter gave him brachas. Beautiful. Beautiful. He's very happy. He's very happy of being a Jew who's listening to the Eibishter. Now, after the Eibishter finished telling him all these halachas, he's not asking a question to the Eibishter. Now he's trying to analyze. He says like this. The Eibishter told me I shouldn't in the 7th year plow my field. So let me try to understand. The Eibishter knows that I have to eat. So what is the Eibishter going to do? He's not asking the Eibishter. He's talking to himself. He's talking to himself. What am I going to have in the 7th year? I know what the Eibishter is going to do. The Rebbe know that we have to eat. Was there such a precedent that, why is the Rebbe giving us the year of Shmita? Shabbos Lashem. 6 years you plow and you deal with earth, with mundane material things. The 7th year you give up for the Eibishter. You don't work. You only give it up for the Eibishter. It has to be a total sabbatical. So what are we supposed to eat? He says very simple. There was already something like this. When the Jews were in the desert, did they have to plow and seed? No. Where did they get their food from? Man min hashamayim. The Rebbe gave them man. So he says, I know what's going to happen. In the 7th year, we're going to be sitting and learning, and the Rebbe is going to give us man min hashamayim. So I am going to come to v'chi soimru man noichal. And if you are going to come to a conclusion and say, what are we going to eat in the 7th year? Most probably. We're not asking the Eibishter a question, what are we supposed to do that year? How could you give us such a mitzvah Shmita? No. They're perfectly fine with Shmita. The best proof, they didn't ask the question when the Eibishter said it. They're now analyzing, as a Chacham, as a good Jew, he's analyzing, obviously, what is the Eibishter, what's his plan? That in the 7th year, he's going to give us man min hashamayim. Beautiful. He's perfectly happy. Comes the Eibishter and says, no, I have something better. In the 6th year, the Eibishter is going to make such a miracle that the crop, instead of giving for 1 year, it will give for 3 years. For the 6th, for the 7th, for the 8th. It's going to be unbelievable. So here we see something very interesting. Is this a negative question, what he's asking? No. It's a perfectly valid question. But it's not a question that he's asking the Eibishter. No. He's just sitting and learning. He's analyzing. The Eibishter says, don't plow and seed. He says, I know what's going to happen. The Eibishter is going to give me man min hashamayim. Says the Eibishter, no, I have something even better than that. Why is it better? Because man min hashamayim is a miracle. It's a miracle. We are in a material world. The Eibishter is not interested in giving us miracles. The Eibishter wants that even if something has to be through a miracle, it should be in nature. So therefore the Eibishter rather would take a miracle and put it into nature rather than to give us a miracle from above. And that is why the Eibishter in the desert he gave them that. But then he wanted the Yidden to go into Israel. Why? So they deal with the material world. Because the Eibishter wants a dira b'tachtonim, as we discussed so many times. The Eibishter wants a dwelling place here in planet Earth when we are going to eat and live on material world. And this is why the Eibishter says, no, I'm not going to make a miracle of man min hashamayim. I'm going to make a miracle in the nature itself. And if that's the case, we will understand another two beautiful points here. And now we're going to have a fascinating subject here. The Rebbe asks a question in Likutei Sichos in a different place, in Chelik Aleph, in the first volume of Likutei Sichos. The Rebbe asks a very simple question. If this is what the story is over here, why does the Rebbe make it that as if the Yidden are asking a question and the Rebbe says, I'm going to give you a blessing? Before we see, the Rebbe says the halakha of Shmita, Yovel, then the Rebbe says the halachas of cheating, then the Rebbe gives brachas. What did he give brachas? That you're going to have all the food, you're going to have everything. And the Rebbe could have continued saying, and on the 6th year, I'm going to give you for 3 years. Why did the Rebbe make it that the Yidden are going to ask a question, what are we supposed to eat? And then comes an answer. Why is it a question answer? Why isn't it directly that the Rebbe says, as part of the brachas, what he's going to give in the 6th year? Look at source number 10. In Likutei Sichos Chelik Aleph says the Rebbe, is doch im Plug nicht verstandig. It doesn't make sense. Noch was darf man der Yutur loschen v'chisomer? Why do we need the whole question of, and if you're going to ask, and when you're going to ask? Noch mehr. Was darf Torah uftan akashe? Why does the Rebbe have to make that there's a question here? V'bal dober as is a shaila in Torah. Because the Rebbe writes in Torah a question, muss man doch sagen, as eich die Kasha hat an Ort in Kedusha. That we must say that even the question has a place in Kedusha. Let me just give a little a point over here. There's a point which is brought in Chassidus many, many times. When the Torah asks a question, and then the Torah gives an answer, being that the Torah asks the question, and everything in Torah is eternal, Torah is nitzchi, is eternal, therefore even the question remains eternal. Although the question has an answer, but the question is also still eternal. Therefore over here also the question, even after the Rebbe gives the food for 3 years, the question still remains, what are we supposed to eat in the 6th year? What does that mean the question still stays? Let's give a look in number 11. This is from the Moreh Nevuchim from the Rambam. The Rambam explains, what's this whole concept of Shmita? What's this whole concept of the 7th year? Why? Why did the Rebbe make a sabbatical? Says the Rambam, on the whole story of Shavsa Haaretz Shabbos Lashem, says the Rambam, Shetoisif Haaretz Tvuasa Vetischazek Be'amdo Shmuta. That the nature of earth is that you seed, you plow, and then it grows. Every year that it grows, it sort of takes away from the power, from the energy of the earth. The 6th year, the earth is already much weaker. Therefore, just like an engine, you have to give it sometimes a little bit to relax a little bit. So this way it could gain strength to start again. You have to give it like a little pause. The same thing is with Shmita. For 6 years you plow and seed. The 6th year the earth is very weak. So we give it a 7th year sabbatical. So the earth has this time to re-energize itself. So then the next 6 years, it will be able to grow much better. So what comes out over here? That this miracle that the Rebbe is making, that the 6th year is going to give for 3 years, is totally opposite of nature. Nature says the 6th year, you have to give the land to rest. Comes the Eibishter and says, no, you know what I'm going to do? On the 6th year, I'm going to make it that it's going to give for 3 years more than the other years. And that makes absolutely no sense. Therefore, that question still remains. What does it mean, the question? This quiz, this amazeness still remains. Wow, look what is happening in the 6th year, that we cannot even grasp. How is it possible that the land in the 6th year makes for 3 years? This is what the Torah is, the question which still remains. In other words, it's not a question, we question with an answer, it's the amazement that the Eibishter is doing something, because this is something that the human mind cannot understand. How can the land do that? If that's the case, then we're going to see something fascinating, unbelievable, what the Torah is out to tell us over here. Let's continue. Source number 12. There's a beautiful Gemara, and this is a lesson for our generation. Something special. Let's look in number 12. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin, Daf Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph, Omar Rav Katina. Rav Katina says as follows, Shit alfe shni havo alma. the world is 6,000 years. Vechad charuv. Then comes 1 year and is going to be sort of destroyed. In other words, it's not going to be the regular system. Shenemar, as it says in Apostle, etc. Says the Gemara, Tanya Kavasa Rav Katina. We learned just like Rav Katina. That what? Keshem Shashvis Mishametes Shano Achas Lesheva Shanim. Just like Shmita makes a stop for once in 7 years. The same thing, the world, there's every 7,000 years, one of those 1,000 is Shmita, is a time of rest. Shenemar, as it says, at that point, at that time, only the Eibishter is going to be revealed. This is a Shabbos Lashem. And it says, Mizmer Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. One of the prayers in Tehillim, and they said in the Beis Hamikdash, was the Mizmer, the song for Yom HaShabbos. What does it mean, Yom HaShabbos? Yom Shekuloi Shabbos, the day which is going to be only Shabbos. Ve'omer, this is all the Gemara says there. Ve'omer, and it says in the pasuk, David HaMelech says, Ki elef shanim be'einecha ki yom esmoel. That 1,000 years for the Eibishter is 1,000 years for us is like 1 day by the Eibishter. So bottom line, says the Gemara, that the concept of the world is that there's 6,000 years of regular times, and then comes the 7th year, which is the times of Mashiach, which is going to be Yom Shekulei Shabbos. Says the Ramban, look at source number 13. Ramban here on this pasuk, over here by us in our parsha, in Parsha Behar. Kvar kosavti b'seide Bereshis. I already wrote in Parshas Bereshis. Ki sheishis emei Bereshis heim yemei olam. That the 6 days of creation are the days of the world. V'yom hashvi, and the 7th day, Shabbos l'Hashem Elokecha, the Shabbos for the Eibishter. What does that mean? Yihiyeh Shabbos l'Hashem Hagadol. It's going to be Shabbos for the Eibishter. K'moshe shaninu, as we learned in the Gemara, b'shvi maho yoemrim. The Levim and the Beis Hamikdash, what did they sing on Shabbos? Mizmer Shir L'Yom HaShabbos. The Mizmer Shir to the day of Shabbos. What does it mean? Le'asid lavish shikulei Shabbos u'mnucha l'chaya elamim. This is the time when there's going to be total rest for the whole world. And he brings that the days and the years, they show in the whole concept of the 6,000 years and the 7th millennium, just like by Shmita. And by the way, the Abarbanel here also in Parsha Behar also talks along these lines. So we see that this whole concept of Shmita is an allusion to the 7th millennium when Mashiach is going to come. Let's go even further. Look at number 14. This is the Eir HaTorah of the Tzemach Tzedek, the 3rd Rebbe of Lubavitch, who has a very interesting maimer on this subject. In Parshas Behar on page Kuf Pei Zayin, he says, V'zeu shekasuv v'chisoimru ma'noichal. With the pasuk that says, what are we supposed to eat when it comes the 7th millennium, when it comes the 7th year, says the Tzemach Tzedek clearly, Koi al elef hashvi, this goes on the 7th millennium. Why? Because hein lo nizra, in the 7th millennium we're not going to plant goes on zriyas ha-mitzvahs. We are not going to do any mitzvahs. Ki mitzvahs beteilis la'asid lavei. Because when Mashiach comes, the mitzvahs are going to be nullified. We're not going to go now into the whole subject of mitzvahs beteilis la'asid lavei, exactly what that means, because there was a whole beautiful sikha from the Rebbe about that subject, which we're going to discuss at a different time. But the bottom line is, we're not going to do mitzvahs the same way we're doing it in Olam Hazeh. So that's why, that's the question that the pasuk says. What are we going to do in the 7th millennium when we're not going to do mitzvahs? How is the Avodas Hashem going to be at that time? So we see here clearly that this is an allusion to the 7th millennium. Even more, if you look at source number 15, there is a Sefer HaMaimorim Tov Reish Ayin Ches. This is from the Rebbe Rashab, the 5th Rebbe of Lubavitch. He has a whole maimer of 8 pages just on this question. V'chi soimru ma'noichal. And he says, look at source number 15, Acho inyan hu. I'm just quoting 4 lines from there, just for our case. Dehina yodua, the shvis reimes aleosid. The 7th year, in other words, Shmita is an allusion to what is going to happen when Mashiach will come. Razal Sanhedrin Daf Tzadik Zayin, as Chachamim said in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, which is the Gemara that we brought before in source number 12. Just like Shmita makes a sabbatical, makes a stop, makes a rest once in 6 years. The same thing in the world. We have this 7th millennium, and that's why the halachas of Shmita are very strong, etc., etc. So now we can understand much better what is this question. If we are saying that the 6 years of work is the 6,000 years of Galus, and the 7th millennium is when Moshiach comes, come the people of Shana Hashishis, those who are in the 6th millennium, which is yours truly, our generation, and they are asking a very, very simple question. We learned so many times that Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, Perek Lamed Zayin, Lamed Vav, Lamed Zayin, he discusses that all the revelations that are going to happen when Mashiach comes in the 7th millennium, where are they coming from? Says the Alter Rebbe, they're all tluyim b'maseinu v'avedoseinu. They're all dependent on what we do in the time of Galus, which means that we are the ones who are preparing all of this, obviously together with all the ones before us, but ultimately we are the ones who are bringing it all into fruition at the end. And we are the lowest and the simplest of all generations. We are the weakest, just like the earth is the weakest in the 6th year, so too we are also the weakest. So therefore we ask, how is that possible that we are going to be the ones who are going to make the 7th millennium? Unbelievable question. Says the Rebbe, yes. Where is the Rebbe putting the bracha? Bashana Hashishis. In the time when the earth is the weakest, in the time when the generation is the lowest, that is where the Rebbe gives the bracha, the real bracha, that the 6th is going to prepare for the 7th, the 8th, and the 9th, etc. Let's look inside the number 16, how the Rebbe brings it out beautifully in Likutei Sichos. Zag der Eibishter maftiach. The Rebbe says, and he promises, Vetzivisi es birchasi. When we do the Aveda of the 6th millennium, the Aveda bismana Galus, that work that we do in this time of Galus, we are doing it with Mesiras Nefesh. We're giving up all our life for it, because a Jew in Galus just doesn't belong. It doesn't make sense that a Yid in Galus should do Torah mitzvahs is something which is above intellect. It makes absolutely no sense. And still and all we do that, says the Rebbe, Gid the Rebbe di bracha milamayla. The Rebbe gives a special blessing as the Zriya for Shana Hashishis, that the sowing, the work that is done in the 6th millennium, in the 6th year, albeit the fact that this is a very weak year, it will be a special blessing from the Eibishter. It's going to be tvua for all the 3 coming periods, 3 coming years. What does that mean? We're going to bring down the revelations of Lasid Levi, Gilui achar Gilui achar Gilui. One revelation, a second revelation, a third revelation. What is it? This is based on the pasuk v'chateilen sich bichlal in drei aliyos. The time of Lasid Levi, the time of Mashiach, is generally divided into 3 stages, as the pasuk says, Yechayenu miyemayim bayem hashlishi kamena v'nichi lefonav. That is going to be 2, and then the 3rd day, which generally, in a very general sense, I'm not going to discuss now the details, but we know there's a time which is called Yemei Mashiach, the time when Mashiach comes and he prepares the world, and then he takes them out of Galus. Then comes the time which is called Tchias HaMesim, when the dead are going to revive, and then comes the time which is called Elef Hashvi. These are the 3 basic periods of the time of Mashiach. Therefore comes the Rebbe and says, we are the generation that we are the weakest, we are the ikvis of the Mashiach, we are the lowest of the lowest. There was never a generation that was as low as we are. And that is why we are the last. So we may ask a question, how is it possible that we are the ones who are going to finish the job and prepare for Shana Hashviz. And says the Eibishter, yes, just like Shmita, that the 6th year, which is the weakest year, the Eibishter puts in there a special blessing that he gives it for the next 3 years. So too, Yidden, you're doing an excellent job. The Eibishter will give us the biggest bracha, and that is that we are going to see Mashiach. Take it from Yad, because this is all based on our Avodah, following what the Eibishter says, and we do this, l'mayla mitam vadas, above the intellect, because it makes no sense. What are you doing in Golus? But because the Eibishter told us to do it, we are doing it 100%, and through this, Emir Hashem, we will be zeiche to see the revelation of Mashiach. Take it from Yad Mamish. So here we see how the Torah is giving us such a beautiful encouragement that Dafke, us who are in the last generation, are being able to be zeicha to the concept of Mashiach and to bring it into fruition. So we see how the Torah seems to be talking about Shmita, the Torah seems to be talking about a question here, there. The question is put in the right place to show us that this is a question of a Ben Chacham, this is a person who is intellectual, and he's not questioning the Eibishter Chas v'Shalom. The question is a very valid analysis of the situation. This is basically what he's doing. And therefore, when it comes to questions, we could right away see if the question is asked in a way that I accept what the Eibishter says, I'm just trying to understand how to bring it into actuality, or the question is, the Eibishter said this, well, I don't necessarily agree, Chas v'Shalom, with what the Eibishter says. So obviously, that's a total different type of question. But the question here in our parsha is very, very valid point that l'chayre, we are in the weakest time. How can we have the keiches to do this? Says the Eibishter, yes, I will give you the keiches. And Emir Hashem, as we said before, through this, we will be zeicha to the revelation of Mashiach, Teikef Umiyad Mamish. Any questions? Yeah, I'll repeat the question, but that requires another whole shiur. We said that we're in the 6th millennium and we're coming into the 7th. L'chayre now is the year 5773, and 6th millennium is the year 6000. So which means that there's at least another 200 years. That's a question that many people ask, but again, I don't want to go into it because it goes into another whole subject. But just in a one-liner, the idea is, we compare it always to Friday and Shabbos, the 6th millennium and the 6th millennium, Yom Shekulei Shabbos. If we would accept Shabbos 12 o'clock at night, midnight, or we would accept Shabbos when it becomes night, then you have a point. The reality is that we accept Shabbos earlier. We don't wait until Shabbos comes. We accept Shabbos earlier than the time. So therefore, just like the Yidden accept Shabbos earlier than the time that Shabbos arrives, so to the Eibishter is going to give the 6th millennium, the 7th millennium earlier than the final deadline, which is the year 6000. This is just in a very, very general point, because as we see, the Yidden Friday afternoon is already out of Shabbos Nochatzos, becomes already part of Shabbos, etc. The whole preparation is part of the Friday afternoon. So therefore, we don't have to wait until the year 6000. Mashiach will come way before the final time of 6000. But again, that's another whole shiur. But the bottom line is that there's no question that our generation has that unbelievable bracha from the Eibishter to finish the job, and therefore let's get to work, because now it's a matter of moments before we will be zeicha to get the Geula. So let's get to work. Hatzlacha Rabbi.